Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosientsho, Ramokgopa and Eskom provided an update on South Africa's electricity generation performance. Eskom implemented stage 3 load shedding yesterday at 2 p.m. After a loss of 2,700 megawatts in the past 14 hours. Well, this included the shutdown of Koeberg Unit 2, which had just been brought back online only on Wednesday, and 2 Kusile Units whose core operations were then impacted by the adverse weather conditions we hear. For more on this, let's now welcome energy expert Mr. Yelland. Chris, always great to have you. Thank you so much for your time. So last week, under similar circumstances, you and I had a load shedding talk date, and I remember we didn't want to be prophets of doom, and I was pretty skeptical about the promises made about that time and that incident only being a once-off. How are you feeling today about the minister basically admitting to some systematic failures as well as setbacks?
Yeah, well, I'm not feeling so good, and I don't think the minister is either. He expressed, his frustration, and in fact, he used the word that he was exasperated at this return of load shedding. Now 3 incidents over the last month, and it seems that it's definitely, he said, a regression. We are regressing, and we haven't made the progress that he expected. And I think he seemed to be suggesting that the problems in load shedding that we experienced were not just technical issues, not just financial constraints, and certainly not just weather issues, but instead they were rather people and performance-related issues, people performance. And he sort of indicated that there's going to be some really hard meetings in the next few days and the weeks ahead, behind closed doors and out of the public eye, and that he intends to visit the affected power stations, that's Kendal, Matimba, Letabo, Camden, Kusile and Koeberg, for what he called consequence management. And I think he sort of hinted that there's going to be a shake-up. That he's very dissatisfied with the people performance, around these issues.
Well, Chris, what is this people performance? Does it have to do with issues of addressing? I'm sure you heard my story before coming into our interview about the constant vandalism of course, electrical infrastructure, as well as the corruption that is alleged to be, of course, facilitated by some of the officials from the utility itself.
Yeah, look, there's not a lot of detail. And in fact, the minister said they're not going to discuss these things in the open. They're going to do it behind closed doors. But he did say that leaders must lead. Well, I don't know, because I think these are tough decisions or tough meetings that are going to have to be held with the leadership of Eskom and the managers. He mentioned the following. He said, leaders must lead and managers must manage and operators must operate. So he was suggesting that these things were not happening properly, and that this was not acceptable. I mean, just to give an example, Eskom indicated in a very thin media release, thin on detail, that this Koeberg Unit number 2 tripped inadvertently whilst an operator was working on what he thought was Unit 1. And this caused Unit 2 to trip. Now, look, this indicates seriously an operator mistake. But more than that, in a nuclear power plant, it indicates a lack of oversight and supervision of operators, which is really disturbing for a nuclear power plant. But very little information has been given, and as I said, the minister says that these are not going to be discussed in front of the media and discussed in front of the public or in front of customers of electricity, which I find a little bit disturbing. I think we do have a right to know.
Absolutely. I mean, we are the customers. I mean, so what is the issue then? Let's stay on that point, Chris. What do you think is the issue specifically at Koeberg that keeps tripping? And the official word from the utility is now that the unit is, their words, unreliable. Yet, as you've just rightly pointed out, it's newly refurbished. So I'm asking this because you and I know that it actually plays quite a significant role in Eskom's goal to actually increase its capacity. In fact, the goal was that by this time, this month, this year.
Yeah, look, it is disturbing. A nuclear power station is often touted as a 24-hour reliable, base load, dispatchable power. But right now, the whole of Koeberg is off. 2 units, that's 1,850 megawatts, is out of service, and it's been like that for a week. And going back, of course, this switching on and off of units has been going on for the last 3 years. As Eskom have been doing the life extension at Koeberg, the so-called long-term operation, upgrading the power station because it's now over 40 years old and they need to extend its life for a further 20 years. And this has resulted in what can only be described as a highly intermittent power station. Intermittent means binary, on or off, in an unpredictable manner, intermittently. That's what intermittency is all about. So certainly, for the last several years, Koeberg cannot be described as 24-hour baseload reliable supply.
And I was actually just wondering, and you mentioned it there, Chris, that of course there's still those considerations for the lifespan, the operating lifespan for another 20 years. And I was wondering if maybe the latest challenges are actually directly linked to the fact that it's just aging infrastructure. But Chris, obviously more planning, in fact, moves towards securing as well as the implementation of additional energy resources is quite vital and necessary at this stage. It's no longer about future planning.
Yes, ultimately, we have got to realize that, in 2030, a number of coal-fired power plants are going to have to start coming offline because they do not comply and have not complied for decades with the air quality requirements of South Africa. And the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment has been very firm that they do not intend to extend the moratorium that Eskom enjoys on compliance with the law. They do not comply with the law. They have not been complying it for years, decades in fact, and the only reason they continue operating is because they keep getting an extension on their operating licenses and without having to comply with the law. And really, this is unsustainable. And the Minister of Environment says that it cannot continue. Problem, of course, is that Eskom holds the country to ransom. They simply say, well, if you don't want, if you want us to, keep these power plants going, you either give us, an exemption from the law, or else we will switch them off. Take your choice, take your pick. And of course, there is little choice because ultimately switching these power stations off without replacing them with alternative energy means that we are going to be plunged into the deepest of load shedding for years to come. The answer, as you've said, is very clear. We have to install aggressively new renewable energy, new battery energy storage, new gas to power, because these are the only solutions that can be delivered in the short term.
Absolutely. Chris, as always, great having you with us. That is Mr. Chris Yelland, who's an energy expert there on the latest bout of stage 3 load shedding expected to go on until Monday.